So we are also starting the live stream.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Kanju.
Hi, Yi. Hi, Johnson. Hi, Sylvia. Hi, Nadia.
Hi, everyone. Rufina
Hi.
from Senegal.
Oh, it's nice to see you here.
Hi.
Hello, Nadia.
Hello.
Hi, Nadia. Yeah. Hi, Georgia.
Hi, hello, Kunzu.
Hello from Boston, Massachusetts.
Hello, nice to see you.
Hi, Lasia.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you for joining.
So as we had the question before, yes, the live stream is on, and so we're live streaming on YouTube, and we can see also the numbers of people connecting to the channel.
Thank you, Sylvia. We will be starting in a couple of minutes to allow for more people to join us. Okay, so I think it is time for us to get started. So welcome everyone to one more online event organized by the International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists. We are delighted to be offering this exclusive event on the theme of Policy for Women in STEM, kindly sponsored from the Korea Women Engineers and Scientists. For those who see me for the first time, my name is Georgia Kremida. I am a professor in civil and environmental engineering at the University of Warwick, and today I am welcoming you all to this event in my role as the Vice President Conferences of INWES. We are having a fantastic agenda prepared for this event with three exceptional speakers. Professor Parvin speaking on the transformation of the Athena Swan Charter, Dr. Justina Onoma speaking on the role of policy and practice in bridging the gender gap in STEM, and Dr. Maria Augusta Arruda speaking about how every scientist can be a diplomat for fostering the idea of a sustainable world. Each speaker will deliver a presentation for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. And once each presentation is finished, we will be inviting questions from the audience. So please note that the event is live on YouTube and will be accessible on our YouTube channel even after the completion of this event today. Please use the chat function to type in your questions, but you can also raise your hand once each presentation is finished, and I will be inviting questions from the audience to directly make your question to the speakers. After each presentation, we will try our best to take as many questions as possible. Apologies in advance if we don't have enough time to take all questions. Please keep your microphone and your camera off throughout the session to improve the meeting experience for everyone. And please do not switch on your video or your microphone unless you get asked to do so. If your connection goes off, please use the same link that you have already used to join us again, or you can attend the event via our YouTube channel. Please use @INWES_global on social media to share your enthusiasm, your thoughts, and your experience from the event. And we are suggesting a hashtag policy for women in STEM. You can be taking questions throughout the throughout the session, and please share your photos with us at our email address communications@inwes.net. A little bit of background information about INWES for those who are joining for the first time on an event delivered from INWES. So INWES is a global network of organizations of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we are an official NGO partner to UNESCO and also to the United Nations Economic and Social Council. We are having an observer status with the United Nations Framework Convention in Climate Change, and we are collaborating with the Commission on the Status of Women. We are having more than 50 organizational members plus individual members, and we are representing over 250,000 women from over 50 countries worldwide. Our scope and the remit of INWES is really to strengthen the capacity of individuals and organizations related to women in STEM worldwide through the exchange of information, networking, and advocacy activities. Also, we are aiming at increasing the presence of women in mainstream STEM activities worldwide, and we see ourselves as a responsible voice and influence on scientific issues for the benefit of the society and the environment. But we want to believe that we go far beyond that. We are offering opportunities to expand education through INWES and our members, and we are encouraging the establishment of new regional and local networks and associations, which are strengthening the global network of women in STEM worldwide. So that is all for myself for now, and it is time for me to introduce our first invited speaker, Professor Parveen Yaqub. Parveen has a BA in Physiological Sciences and a DPhil in Biochemistry from the University of Oxford. She has pursued an academic career mainly at the University of Reading, where she is currently Professor of Nutritional Physiology, Pro-Vice Chancellor Research and Innovation, and Deputy Vice Chancellor. Parveen serves on a number of research funding panels and is the chair of the Athena Swan Governance Committee. Parveen, it is a great honor to have you here with us today, and we are very much looking forward to hearing to your presentation on transforming the Athena Swan Charter. I would like to stop sharing my screen right now, and I would like to invite Parveen to start sharing her screen and take us through her presentation. Thank you so much, Parveen, for being here.
Thank you so much, Georgia, for the introduction and for the invitation to join you today. It's absolutely fantastic to be here with you. So I'm going to tell the story to date about the UK experience of the Athena Swan Charter, which was established in 2005 and has been through several evolutions now, the most recent of which was an independent review and a transformation. I'm going to talk about the impact of the Charter and the impact that it's had on the sector since its launch. But I also want to explain some of the criticism that drove the independent review. And I'm going to finish by talking about the transformation of the Charter itself and touch on some of the current challenges. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Athena Swan Charter, it's a targeted self-assessment framework that was established in 2005 to help higher education institutes achieve their gender equality objectives, also inclusive working practices and an equitable working environment. And as a charter, it provides a recognised structure, it provides benchmarking and principles and standards of expectation in an effort to achieve fairness, transparency and consistency across the sector. The Charter promotes accountability, equal opportunity, and it improves awareness about diversity of experience and also helps higher education institutes with policy making and is aimed to drive improvement. It's always intended to be used as an audit and an improvement tool rather than an end in itself. And the Swan in Athena Swan stands for Scientific Women's Academic Network because originally it represented women in STEM. But in 2015, the Charter was then extended to all disciplines, and hence now there's non-capitalisation of the Swan. So the Charter has 10 principles, which I tend to categorise into two categories, the careers and the culture-based principles, but also a 10th principle, which is a commitment to consider intersectionality. And these are some of the key principles. It's not all of them, but on the top row are the commitments that I see as addressing underrepresentation of women, especially in STEM, the loss of women in the career pipeline, gender pay gap. So that covers the principles that I would group under careers. And in the second row is commitment from senior leaders to achieve sustainable structural and cultural changes and to tackling discriminatory treatment. And those are the ones that I see as cultural. And then in the bottom row, we have intersectionality, something that we're really still at an early stage of understanding. And so this is about a commitment to consider intersection of gender with other factors wherever possible. Now, in 2019, there was an impact evaluation of the Charter that showed that it was being widely used as a tool for addressing gender-related challenges throughout UK higher education sector. Women in award-holding departments and institutions, particularly those at silver and gold level, were being encouraged to apply more for promotion. They were being offered more flexible working practices. They were benefiting from mentoring and coaching, and they were more optimistic about their career prospects. In 2011, the National Institute for Health Research, NIHR, linked its funding to a requirement to hold an Athena Swan Silver Award. And there was an immediate impact of that, which was that there was a substantial increase in the number of departments carrying out medical or clinical research that gained an Athena Swan Silver Award. But this slide is from a paper from the British Medical Journal published in 2020, and it goes a bit deeper than that to show the impact of the link between research funding and a requirement to hold a silver Athena Swan Award. So if you start by looking at the data for 2011, you'll see that 18% of researchers holding NIHR funding were women. And that's pretty low, isn't it? Of those women, about 8% were at mid-level leadership and about 10% were senior leaders. If you now look at the data for 2016, you see that there's a substantial increase in the proportion of women holding NIHR funding, more than 20% of mid-level female leaders and 15% of senior female leaders. So in other words, linking research funding to a requirement for a department to hold an Athena Swan Silver Award increased the proportion of NIHR funding going to women, and in particular increased the proportion of mid-level female leaders holding NIHR funding. Now, NIHR in the UK removed the requirement for applicants to hold Athena Swan Awards in 2020, and that was partly about reducing the admin burden during the pandemic, but also because the NIHR felt that the Athena Swan Charter had done its job in embedding gender equality practice, and that they wanted the future focus to be on broader commitment to all dimensions of equality, diversity and inclusion. I guess we can argue about whether linking funding to a requirement to hold an Athena Swan Award is the right approach, but the fact is that in the UK, there's still a stubborn 15% gender pay gap in the sector, which has barely moved for years. And there's evidence that if you're in a pre-1992 university in the UK, or you're in a university with a triple accredited business school or a medical school, you're likely to see a smaller proportion of women in the top quartile of pay. And it also seems that this is not affected by Athena Swan membership or award level. So in other words, if you hold an Athena Swan award, it doesn't make any difference in terms of gender pay gap. And that's led to the accusation that Athena Swan is just window dressing in terms of the gender pay gap. I'd say two things in response to that. The first is that there's more to Athena Swan than the pay gap. There are all sorts of cultural issues which are really important to address and which wouldn't necessarily affect the gender pay gap. And the second is that it seems from this data that Athena Swan alone is not enough to address the pay gap, because that would require systematic dismantling of the gender regimes and the market forces that exist around business schools in particular. And I guess I don't need to tell you that that would be a huge challenge. Now, if you look at any UK university website, you'll see that they announce successful Athena Swan Awards with great pride. The statements that they put out suggest that the equality work feeds into local and institutional strategy and it supports cultural change, but almost without exception, every celebratory announcement also acknowledges the considerable work that goes into an application. And there's no doubt that a charter application requires a lot of commitment and effort, and there's a real drive in the UK at the moment to reduce bureaucracy. And as a result of that heavy workload and bureaucracy around Athena Swan applications, Advance HE, which owns the charter in the UK, commissioned an independent review, which was eventually published in March 2020. And that review supported the continuation of the charter as a major driver of gender equality in higher education, but it recommended that the process should be streamlined to reduce the admin burden. The consistency and transparency of the assessment process should be improved, that applicants were provided with better support and training, and that the remit of the charter should be broadened to include gender as a spectrum, and also to include professional, technical and operational staff within universities. And at the time, there was a real urgency in rebuilding trust and currency in the charter. And for that reason, the Athena Swan Governance Committee was created, and I took up the chair of that in September 2020. So we were responsible for overseeing the implementation of the recommendations in the review. And for the areas that were particularly new, Advance HE established working groups to help us address specific issues. So we consulted with working groups on intersectionality, on gender as a spectrum, and on professional, technical and operational staff. So this is what the current charter looks like at a very simple level. There are 3 levels of Athena Swan award. For a bronze award, you need to identify your priorities and present an action plan to address them, including a plan for how you intend to recognise and reward equality work. So that's 3 simple criteria. To progress to a silver award, you need to show progress and evidence of success against those priorities. And for a gold award, you need to demonstrate sector leading activities and be willing to support others on gender equality, whether that's within higher education or across other sectors. And each of those criteria has clear underpinning expectations and guidance notes that sit beneath the criteria, which provide examples for action plans. So the transformation of the Athena Swan Charter, which was launched in June this year, has resulted in a process which is more streamlined, more flexible, and has improved transparency and consistency. And specifically, the streamlining was achieved through shortening the application forms, halving the data requirements, and panel operations that have a quicker turnaround from submission to result. So we're aiming to have a turnaround time eventually of 8 weeks from the date of submission. The flexibility was achieved through the ability of applicants now to focus on their own context and priorities rather than having a prescribed set of criteria. That the award criteria that measure progress and success against the applicant's own priorities. And there are now options for how a culture survey is implemented. So institutions can run their own survey entirely, but can include a core number of mandatory questions, or they can run the Athena Swan culture survey. The transparency was achieved through new award criteria that gave better clarity on the expectations at all award levels for both applicants and reviewers. And the application forms have been structured to align with the award criteria, so it's clear what is being asked and why. And there's a new scoring rubric and feedback structure to make sure that the basis of decisions from the panels is clear. And then finally, the consistency was achieved by new panel terms of reference, setting out the roles of chairs and reviewers really clearly, rigorous panel recruitment and training, and that includes annual standardization. And then there's the scoring rubric that I mentioned. It's similar to what research councils in the UK use, and it supports consistency between panels. So the new framework adopts a supportive rather than a judgmental approach, and it does that by allowing applicants to improve their submission through a minor or major revisions process if they don't initially meet the criteria. And it's also got a much greater emphasis on member support and guidance from Advance HE. So the role of the Athena Swan Governance Committee now is to monitor the impact of the transformation to make sure that it's achieving the changes that were intended. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the recommendations of the independent review was to broaden the remit of the Charter to include gender as a spectrum. But there's a really complex and evolving social and legal landscape around the debate about gender versus sex-based rights. And essentially, this is about the fact that sex and gender reassignment in the UK are protected characteristics according to the Equality Act, but gender identity is not. And those who argue for sex-based rights don't always accept the concept of gender as a spectrum. The fact that the Athena Swan Charter was established as a gender equality charter places it right at the centre of that sex versus gender equality debate. And Advance HE have a real challenge, but is currently revising its data monitoring guidance to give better clarity around the collection of data with respect to sex as a protected characteristic, and to develop clear approaches to sex and gender in its guidance. It's shown a commitment to open conversations about the issue, reviewing guidance, working closely with the sector, but there's no doubt that those conversations are going to be really difficult. And I'm going to finish with a story. In the 1970s, Dorothy Hodgkin was having dinner at an Oxford college when a male colleague asked her if it was difficult being a woman scientist. "Not since I won the Nobel Prize," was her response. She won the Nobel Prize in 1964, the only British woman scientist to win a Nobel Prize. And she won that prize for solving the atomic structure of molecules such as penicillin and insulin by X-ray crystallography. If you visit the Royal Society website this week or look at their Twitter pages, you'll see a really excellent film about Dorothy Hodgkin winning the Nobel Prize, and I'd recommend that. But this slide shows the headline, the newspaper headlines when she won the prize: Nobel Prize for British wife and mother of three. And it always amazes me to see this headline. We might not see headlines like this anymore, but we clearly still have work to do. Thank you for your attention. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Parveen. That was fantastic. And what an end. Yes, really. Thank you so much. Can I invite any questions from the audience, please? So Kate, yes, Kate Sears is having a question for Parveen. Kate, you can turn on your camera and microphone. Hello.
Hi, Parveen. Thank you very much. That was really, really helpful to see that overview. You mentioned that the NIHR had said that Athena Swan had done its job, but everything you said after that suggested that wasn't true. Do you think we need to challenge that decision not to require an Athena award?
It's a really good question, and I'm sorry if you can hear drilling. Somebody's decided to drill right outside my office today. I'm not sure why. It's a really difficult question because there is such a drive in the UK at the moment to reduce bureaucracy. And my personal view is that using research funding, using an Athena Swan Award as a requirement for research funding as a stick, it doesn't, instinctively to me, it doesn't feel like the right approach. We should want to do this, shouldn't we? And when I say that to my colleagues at Advanced HE, they say I'm being naive and way too optimistic, because if you don't make that a requirement, then people won't do it. So I actually have a kind of a moral struggle with this myself, because I think there is enough momentum and I think people want it enough, but without the stick, I don't know whether it will happen. So I can't see us going back to a place where the NIHR will require this again. And actually none of the other funders have ever required an Athena Swan Award as a requirement for funding. So I think we have to work on the benefits and communicating the benefits and how much more work needs to be done, and focus on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I can see a question from Gail in the chat. Gail Matson, after expansion of scope beyond STEM, has there been an impact on the advancement of women in STEM fields?
So the expansion of scope beyond STEM only happened in 2015. It's really recent and too early to say. I mean, I think there are still only a handful of departments that are in non-STEM subjects that hold awards yet. So I think it will still take time. So the question is about the impact on advancement of women in STEM specifically. There are papers, there is data on that. Some of it is qualitative, some of it is quantitative. But I think the thing that really stands out is the lack of advancement in terms of gender pay gap. And I think I've highlighted at least one or two of the reasons for that. That's going to be a challenge. And I think that's going to need something bigger than Athena Swan and something much more coordinated, not just within the UK, but probably internationally.
Thank you, lovely. I see one more question in the chat which says, is the pay gap noticed between the same grade, or do you see that beyond same grade?
It depends what sort of institution you're in. So in my institution, the pay gap is most obvious at grade 9, that's professorial level. And I mentioned business schools as being a key factor, the market forces around business schools. So we have a triple accredited business school. And what you tend to find in a triple accredited business school is a predominance of white males who are paid a lot of money. And our pay gap at grade 9 is almost entirely down to that. And so it depends on the type of institution where you see the pay gap and the reasons behind it.
Lovely, thank you. And just to follow up on this, so how is your institution intending to deal with that?
Well, the business school challenge is not something we can deal with on our own, because if we tried to rationalize salaries within our business school, a lot of people would leave and go to other business school. I mean, I hate to say this, but business schools do operate like a cartel, and it's in their benefit to keep salaries high. And this is something that needs to be dealt with systematically. It's a huge challenge.
Yeah, thank you so much. I see one more question from Margaret asking, is the Athena Swan open to women outside the UK?
That's a very good question. I was hoping somebody would ask that, because there is an equivalent of Athena Swan. It doesn't have exactly the same name, but in Australia, also in US and Canada and in Ireland. And if you look at the Advanced HE website, there is some information on there, which is about opportunities for participating in a pilot if you're from another country. So it's worth having a look at that.
Perfect, thank you so much. One more question. So Rafina is saying we have similar problems in African countries. Do you think that we can find solutions together?
You know, I would really like to think that that would be possible. And certainly through Advanced HE and their desire to become more international, I think that's something we should definitely work towards.
Lovely, thank you so much. And I can see Nadia is having her hand up. So Nadia, you can turn on your camera and microphone, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very, very exciting talk. My question is about, I come from Canada. Federal granting agencies in Canada require EDI action to get grants and therefore force universities to have EDI policies. What do you think?
Well, that's something that, so although we don't have any research funding bodies that require an Athena Swan award anymore, there are programs, research funding programs, particularly doctoral training partnerships, where you have to submit an EDI action plan. Usually it's a two-page.
Oh, please, can everyone keep their microphones off, please? Microphones off. Thank you so much. Sorry, Parveen, about that.
That's fine. So there are many funding calls, particularly those relating to doctoral training partnerships, where we're training our new young scientists, where an institution is required to submit a two-page or so EDI action plan. I think that's a really good thing. I've been on a number of funding panels where we've been assessing proposals, and what I tend to find is that the EDI action plans are quite poor. And the reason that they're poor is often they're not smart, and often they bear no relation to what I know the institution is actually doing. And some of the really good sector leading work that an institution is doing doesn't seem to be reflected in the EDI action plan. So I think this is an indication that in many of our institutions, people think of EDI as something you do separately over here.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily integrate and infiltrate into everything you do. And that's where I think we need to change. We need to have a cultural change, so that when you're thinking about a piece of research or a project that you're going to engage with, you think about EDI as part of the project, and you don't just copy and paste something from your website that says something about EDI and assume that it will just happen when the project starts.
Thank you, lovely. I can see one more question in the chat from Kongju. Kongju, do you want to turn on your camera and your microphone and ask the question directly to Parveen?
Hi.
Hello.
It's very nice, nice talk, and I really agree with you. And we have very similar program in Korea, and we try to promote the female scientists in Korean NSF. But problem is that the reviewers just the real practice is not that so good, because the male reviewers just reduce the point for to think about the extra point for female. With that reason, the result is quite similar, even though the Korean NSF tried to give extra point for the female scientists.
Right. That's really that's really tough.
With that reason, it's quite culture.
Yes.
As you told us, that's more important than the how do you solve that kind of problem in England?
Well, I think the first step is representation. So I imagine that where you find the most challenge is where there is very low representation of women. So the first step for me, I think, is to push representation of women, to make sure that women are represented where it's important. So even in my own university, just 5 years ago, my university executive board was all white and all male. And it wasn't deliberate. It's just because that's the way it was, and there didn't seem to be a pipeline. And a lot of decisions were made with a very narrow focus, because there was such a lack of diversity on the executive board. Within 5 years, we now have much better representation by females. Obviously, we're not all white anymore. And the decision-making, the nature of the decision-making has completely changed. So I think you have to take it one step at a time. And the first step is to be represented, and to encourage your colleagues to try to get positions on a board or where important decision making is made, so that they can be part of that decision. It's really tough, though.
Yes, it's very tough, but we will try more.
Yes.
KWSC in Korea support that kind of point a lot. And
yes, and that's where
gradually better. Yeah.
Yes, that's where it starts. I admire you and applaud you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So are there any other questions for Parveen? No. So can I ask one question then, Parveen? Because you were the chair of this big, very big transformation in the Athena Swan Charter, which one was the biggest challenge, I think, that you had to tackle in the process of the transformation?
I guess this is an unexpected answer. It was the impatience of the sector and the impatience of the review group who published the review. Because when the review was published, the sector wanted to see the changes immediately, but there were 41 recommendations and we had to go through them painstakingly to make sure that they would work with the sector. And what we didn't want to do was to make a whole range of changes to the sector and then just launch it without talking to the sector as we were going. So as we were implementing the changes, we were consulting with the sector to make sure that this was what they wanted to see. And so I think that was the biggest challenge. So it took a year from the time that the Athena Swan Governance Committee, almost a year, from the time that the committee was formed until we eventually launched the Transform Charter.
Lovely, thank you so much. So I think since we have no more questions and we have already taken so much time from your precious schedule and very busy schedule, I would like to express my sincere thanks. It has been a great honor to have you here with us, Parveen. Thank you so, so much. And congratulations on the fantastic work on the transformation of the Athena Swan Charter.
Thank you so much, Georgia.
Thank you. See you later. And feel free to stay as much as you want on this session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. And I think it is time to continue with our next speaker. So I will return to my slides. So our next honored speaker is Dr. Justina Onoma. So Justina is an agricultural development economist, is a senior research scientist at the Science and Technology Policy Research Institute of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana, and a doctoral fellow at the University of Ghana. Justina is interested in innovation systems, research, policy, and industry linkages, rural development, poverty dynamics, and technology transfer. And Justina holds certifications in evidence and policy and science diplomacy. Justina will be speaking today to us about the role of policy and practice in bridging the gender gap in STEM. Justina, thank you so, so much. We are honored to have you here today. When you are ready, please feel free to share your slides and take us through your presentation.
Thank you very much, Georgia. I'll share my presentation now.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you once again. I'm most honored to contribute to this particular discussion. Justina Onoma, as has already been introduced, and I work with the Science and Technology Policy Research Institute, which is under the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, Ghana. I'm also the Next Einstein Forum Ambassador for Ghana. It's just an initiative aimed at promoting science in our communities, especially among youth in the African region. So whilst preparing for this particular webinar, I came across this photo, and I thought it was very funny and interesting. So this is a community of physicists, I think 90 plus years ago, where it was just a group of men with only one woman, who is Maria Curie. You could see over here. But over time, after 90 years, they took the same photo in the same spot, and you can find so many women, and then they just placed one man here. So it actually speaks to the challenge of STEM gender gap, and also speaks to the progress that we have made over the years by churning out more women in STEM. So briefly, I would like to introduce my institute. The Council for Scientific and Industrial Research is one of the foremost national science and technology research in Ghana. So we are responsible for R&D here in Ghana. It's a government institution. It has 13 different institutes and they all specialize in different thematic and then mandated areas. For my institute, which is the Science and Technology Policy Research Institute, our mandate is mainly to conduct research and provide knowledge-based information to contribute to the formulation and implementation of policies and programs. So that's what we do. So we have various expertise from agriculture to environment, climate change issues. We have women in science. We have almost every expertise that you'll find within the STEM field. We have them here. So the first question I would like to ask is why do we really need to close the gender gap? And I think we need to close the gender gap in STEM because globally, as it's been said, there's about 30% of STEM labor force who are being women, which most of us are aware of. And you can imagine 30 against 70%. It's a huge gap. And for me, this has even been years and years of advocacy, years and years of representation, years and years of hard work for us to be able to bridge. So it's important for us to bridge this gap. And for the Sustainable Development Goals achievement, which one of the key principles also talks about inclusivity. If you are able to bridge the gender STEM gap, then we know that we are on the path of achieving most of our SDG principles. And also for STI to become very relevant, it has to be very, very relevant to diversified groups, providing unique solutions. So both men, women, children, youth, it has to be relevant to them. And also having more women in STEM, for me, it kind of increase our intergenerational impact of actually bridging the STEM gap and increasing more participation and representation of women in STEM. For instance, as mothers, women are mothers, and we mother children, we even mother children who are not our biological ones. So imagine there are more women in STEM. As you are a STEM person, you would also want to bring up more STEM children as long as they have the interest in the field, and also to guide them. So it kind of be able to increase our intergenerational impact so as more women are found in STEM, they also create more women also in STEM. So those are also one of the strategies where we could find in trying to bridge that gender gap. So I would like to take you on a journey of a case in Ghana. So I'll be speaking from my experiences working here in Ghana across various institutional frameworks and then also practice. So for Ghana, there are so many policies that focuses on gender, but I'd like to focus on just 3 of them. The first is the National Gender Policy. The National Gender Policy is a policy for gender, mainstreaming gender activities. So for both men, women, children, the youth. So I was actually trying to find whether there are STEM embedded specific strategies that are within these specific policy instruments. Then you realize that for the National Gender Policy, that there is none of the objectives actually talks about, let's say, promoting women in STEM or trying to break the gap in STEM. It talks about so many fields of representation, empowering young girls, empowering women in terms of economic activities, in terms of agriculture, almost every field. But you can't find specifically that the policy actually talks about bridging STEM gap in the policy. But like reading along, you just find this. I said one of the actions that they would like to take was to transform gender stereotypes in schools, and support girls to study science-related subjects such as IT, mathematics, engineering, amongst others. So sometimes I ask, is this an afterthought? Because it wasn't really embedded within the various policies and even the strategies of this particular policy, it wasn't. But like reading along the line, you find something like this. So I would say that for the gender gap, it's neither the objectives of each policies are addressed, but they are not totally blind of STEM, and they are not totally blind of the gender, the gap that we have within STEM for women. And then when you pick the Ghana STI policy, that's a science, technology, and innovation policy, though the objectives do not really sit directly in bridging, like increasing the participation of women in STEM, but you pick some of the strategies. One actually talks about government to take appropriate measures to institute programs which encourage girls to specialize in STEM at the secondary and higher echelons of education system. Towards this end, MESTI, So MESTI is the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation. And then it says it will ensure design special incentive and motivation packages for female science students. So though it's not within the broad objectives of the STI policy, it's embedded within the strategies of the policy that the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation is trying to bring up programs to incentivize more girls' participation in science. And the last policy I would like to talk about is our own policy within the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. We have the CSI gender policy. Amongst other things, this policy actually seeks to promote and encourage more women participation in STEM careers and leadership. Over the years, when you come to the CSI, you realize that the female enrollment, staff or labor force enrollment within the CSI was very, very low. So most directors of the various 13 institutes and then also the head office, like the administrative body of the CSIR, actually became intentional about widening the scope, widening the recruitment gap to come up, employ more women scientists. So for the past 10 years, almost 10 years that I've been in this institute, that's the CSIR STEPRI, I've seen about 50% increase, let's say about 48% percentage point increase in the research staff ratio between men and women. Back in 2010, there were just about 2 female scientists of staff within the research grade staff. But now we have almost 50% of staff being women at the institute. And also, we also recorded our first female director in 2018 after almost 30 years of existence of the institute. So it means that, like, practically and then policy-wise, there are specific efforts to embed more women in STEM, to encourage and promote more women in STEM, and even to take up STEM leadership positions. There is therefore the need to develop gender-specific STEM policies to tackle the gender gap. So you realize that with the CSI gender policy, because it's very specific to women in STEM, to increasing the participation of women in the STEM field, it's actually having more impact. That cannot be said of the others, which have a very broad scenarios. And some other policy support programs that I have found is the Girls in ICT program. It encourages senior high school girls to build their capacity in order for them to be able to carry on to the tertiary level, pursuing courses in ICT and digitalization. We also have the Women in Engineering project that is housed by my institute, the CSR STEPRI, and it's basically aimed at identifying and bridging barriers to women participation in STEM. We also have the Girls in Mathematical Science programs by the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences, with support from the Ministry of Education, with funding from the Ghana Education Trust Fund. It's actually a 1-year program that builds the capacity of young girls who want to venture into the mathematical science. It's interesting to know that these young girls who have graduated, this is their first cohort. They graduated just this year. So this is the first year of the project implementation. It's not all of them that had science backgrounds, but they had interest in mathematics. So this program actually kind of included almost girls in various fields. So you could be a scientist, you could be a science student, you could be an art student, you could be any student, as long as you're interested in mathematics and you want to pursue mathematics at the tertiary level. This program was actually for them, and it was actually very successful as more students graduated from this. So for the policy imperatives, what I would like to say is that we need a deeper interministerial coordination, because reading the policies, you realize that there are efforts at each and every strategy, each and every level of the objective, that you will find that you need other ministries or other policy institutions to be able to collaborate to establish, to make it very successful. So when there is stronger interministerial coordination, we know that the gender gap in STEM would also be bridged. And also for government to establish and resource more women-centered STEM training hubs. You could see that once the thing is centered on women, you see more women participation. I saw a blog post then that says that when they called for application for a particular program, like a broad application. Few women applied. But when you call for a program that is specific, that this is for women, you see a lot of women applying. So we need such programs. We need such programs, and we need such resources from government to be able to push that agenda. And we also need to align gender issues in our STI policy. It has to be very clear. It has to be very vibrant. When you pick the policy, you should know that this objective is actually addressing the gender STEM gap that we find ourselves. So for practice, what I would suggest is that we need a cultural shift that kind of create a lot of stereotypes for women participation in STEM. So even our home upbringing is a key factor. Our external environmental factors also has a lot to do with women and girls getting more interest in science. We also need an educational shift. We need to provide more scholarship that targets women participation in STEM. And it will definitely, for instance, when we are applying for our various PhD or master's degree programs, and then there's funding. Sometimes whether you like the course or you don't, as long as there is funding for that particular program, you are tempted to apply. So in the same way, if you provide funding for women to study STEM, we'll find more women in STEM. We also need institutional shifts. So we need STEM organizations that push for more women, and then also policies as the CSIR policy has clearly encapsulated. So I would like to also build on the last slide that the Athena Charter actually presented on representation. How do we represent our women in STEM? When you look at the various gender policies that I found, just looking at the cover page, how have they really represented us? Is it very attractive? Are we represented as inanimate objects as we have in this health sector gender policy? Or are we represented in this? I mean, this is a young girl in a farm. Clearly, she's not smiling. It means whatever she's doing, she's not really passionate about it. Is that the representation you want to give? And then when you look at this gender analysis report also, look at the women. Is it just one-sided representation that we want to give to women? Or is actually this kind of representation we want to give to women? Women can be anything. We can be with the men and be rubbing shoulders with the men in the laboratories. We can be also in the market. We can as well also be in the ICT firm. So it's a change how we see images is clearly one way to change the world by bell hooks. So for me, the photographic image young girls see of women in STEM speaks a lot. If women in STEM don't project ourselves as being attractive, then the young girls will see that the field is not really attractive for us to also be in. So we need to have a very good representation of women in STEM for the other generation, the younger generation, to also pick up women in STEM. So for here in practice, I would like to highlight what I call the girl called Zoo and developer. So Zoo is just an under 25-year-old girl from a very minority group in Ghana. She's a Muslim. She also comes from an area where there's a lot of gender gap in terms of education, in terms of resource access in the northern Ghana. But Zoo has been able to fund a coding hub that trains young girls. Within 3 years, Zoo and her team at Developer have trained almost 2,000 young girls. So what I ask is that, can we imagine the future of women in STEM if we have like 10 zoos in each region or state? So these girls probably wouldn't have had any interest in STEM because already they are marginalized from the culture they come from the perspective they see, from the people that they see. But if Zoo can train or transform about 2,000 young girls, then we know that if we have 10 of them, we could have a very far-reaching impact in our women in STEM gender gap region. I also like to speak about the very popular National Science and Math quiz here in Ghana. It's actually a quiz that has a lot of passion, a lot of euphoria. When you see this particular crowd, this is the grand finale, one of the pictures. Actually, the competition ended just last November. And this was one of the pictures I saw for the grand finale. It talks about the passion that the nation has for this particular National Science and Math quiz. And in this, the structure of the National Science and Math quiz is like that. There are 3 quiz mistresses, and all of them are females. And then the managing director of the production house is equally a female. But the strange thing is that none of the female schools, so in Ghana, we have mixed schools, we have boys' schools, and then we have the girls' schools. We've not had any winner from a girls' school. We've not had any winner from a mixed school. So this particular year, this girl called Francisca Lamini, she represented a school, which is a mixed school, and they actually went to the finals. And you could see how everyone was churning around and supporting this particular school just because of Francisca. And what they have done actually by putting the quiz mistresses as females is trying to encourage more females to partake in STEM. So by and large, we want to see that in the end, these girls' schools or mixed schools that has female representation would also win. So this is one of the strategies that we can use. So someone will ask, has the National Science and Math Quiz ever solved any challenge in the nation? The quiz mistress will tell you no, but it's actually beefing up interest in junior high school students to pursue science. It's beefing up interest in girls to pursue science and STEM related fields. I also like to talk about the Next Einstein Forum. So the Next Einstein Forum is a platform that connects science, society, and policy in the rest of in Africa and the rest of the world. And they have champions who are called the NEF ambassadors, which I am one of them. So one of the key activities that we do every year is African Science Week. So the African Science Week presents project activities that kind of bring out the scientific abilities and also open up opportunities that are available in STEM to young students, whether boys, girls. And there is also the Women in STEM programs that has very accomplished scientists and young girls also embedded, all with the aim of trying to beef up the interest of science among these young girls. And also, so this was, I think 2 years ago, because of the COVID, this year we could not organize the African Science Week, but this was 2 years ago, where a group of young girls were being trained by accomplished scientists in Ghana. And in my personal capacity, I also serve as the mentor for the Ghana Science and Tech Explorer Prize, also the Car Powership Girl Power Program. So all these are in effort to kind of do our bit to bridge the gender gap, to raise more girls to have a very good interest in science. So in summary, I said beyond policy, what are we actually doing? I think the challenge actually goes beyond policy. In practice, it's not really far from us. In our various homes, how are we bringing up our children? Look, this image, for instance, has a boy with a track, clearly like somebody who can be an engineer. And the girl has been given a doll. So in the end, even in our homes, the way we gift our children actually stereotype their gender roles. But in B, you realize that both the girl and boy, they are all kind of playing with their engineering skills and everything. So what I ask is, do we do A or B? And which of them do we think will actually bridge the gender gap in STEM? So this is my 1-year-old daughter. I brought this picture up because when I bought this particular car for her, the other sisters were like, Mommy, this is too boyish. And I told her it's not boyish. So I want her to also know that she can also buy a Ferrari in the future if she wants to. She can even engineer a Ferrari if she wants to. So how do we represent our gender, our women in STEM, even in our various homes? So finally, I would like to say, let's portray such pictures.
Thank Justina, just few seconds, please, because we have overrun a little bit.
Yeah, this is the last slide. So let's portray such pictures. The girl can, and the girls have done it, and yes, we will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, lovely. That was fantastic, really nice talk. Thank you so much, Justina. So there are a couple of comments and questions in the chat. So Margaret, first of all, is asking, what is the situation in Ghana universities? Does it mirror what you have also in the council? The situation that you observe in the council, is it reflecting also on the situation at the universities in Ghana?
Okay, yes, and one beautiful scenario that has actually happened this year at the University of Ghana, we've never had a female vice chancellor. We've never had a female vice chancellor. But this year at the University of Ghana, we've had our first female vice chancellor. We have the main chancellor being a female. We have the registrar being a female. Almost all the 4 top level administrative positions are being occupied by women. So it's a move that is actually creeping in, and then yes, in the universities you find them, and not only at the University of Ghana, even for the other public universities. Now we have female vice chancellors also.
Lovely. That is really nice to hear. Nadia is having her hand up. So Nadia, please make your question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. A very, very nice talk. We know that there are many policies, programs, events around the world in order to encourage and attract girls and women in STEM. And we know that none work for everyone. And you highlight three aspects: cultural, educational, and institutional. So yes, of course, we know that there are some factors explaining underrepresentation in STEM for women. And I join Gail, the question from Gail, what about family environment? Because it's very important to attract and to encourage women. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Justina.
I thought there was a comment. Please, can you come again with the question? I thought she was adding her voice. So please come again with the question.
Yeah, my question is, we must absolutely, if we want to have a real change, we must absolutely educate women in order to encourage other women and girls instead. That's what do you think, what's the situation in Ghana? Because in Africa, we know it's not only in Africa, but in Asia, in other part of the world, we have some problem with education.
Yes, as you rightly said, I think the challenge is global, it's everywhere. Ghana, we have our own share of the huge gender gap where girls are made to stay home for their brothers to continue on higher education. But at the same time, we also have a lot of efforts that are going on to kind of encourage these girls individually, even policy-wise. We have programs that try to support these girls to pursue higher education. So yes, we are all in the soup together. It's an effort, it's a process. I wouldn't say we are there yet, but we are not completely blind of the gender gap. And the government is not completely blind of the effort he needs to put into this. So we have ministries actually working towards this.
That's really nice. Thank you, Justina. I see two more questions, and these are going to be the last ones to make to you. Does the government support you and her team?
Okay, so the government supports for the CSIR. It's, as I said, it's a government institution. So yes, the government supports us, pays our salaries, and sometimes somehow give us something for research. But most of our research is actually donor funded. But for the other side of the angle I belong to, the Next Einstein Forum, and then other things, yes, there is collaboration with government, but mostly it's being sponsored by also donor agencies as well.
Lovely. And Gail is asking, how are you addressing parents to encourage their daughters to consider education and careers in STEM? So, for example, yourself, you're encouraging your daughter, but how is this happening in Ghana overall?
So it's not very general that I could speak of, but one of the strategies, I think one of the schools that I work with adopted was to bring the parents, especially when they have STEM career days, they actually invite the parents to come and see what their girls actually can do. So it's a kind of a strategy that kind of indirectly trying to change the parents' mind that the girls can be more things than whatever they think that the girls can be in their various homes. So kind of engaging the parents, even especially for actors in the educational institution. We do not have to leave the performance of students alone between us as instructors and the students. we need to really involve the parents as well, because in the end, when they go home, it's the parents who rather encourage or discourage them, whatever that we have told them as practitioners in the field. So we need to actually embed parents also in our various actions that we want to promote for women in STEM.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Justina. I see that Vicky is having her hand up. Vicky, if it is a very fast question, please turn on your camera and your microphone, because I really want to see you and hear your question. Vicky, you are muted. We cannot hear you.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So
Now,
thank you. So thank you, Justina, for your presentation. It was very nice. And I just wanted to point out when you were talking about the image ladies are given in STEM fields really matters. I think I don't know when you are talking about the image, what do you mean by the image? Can you just explain this a little bit? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the image, I'm very particular about pictures, like the image you see, seeing something for the first time. And for me, it's what they see. For the women who are in science, how are they like? How is their career path like? How are they being represented? If you listen to the first presentation, this is somebody who has won a Nobel Prize. And instead of the media to capture it as the female scientist has won a Nobel Prize, they said the wife of Oxford. So it's a complete misrepresentation. So are we saying that, I mean, beyond a wife, she's nothing more? Meanwhile, This is a serious scientist who has won a prize. So in all those images, it's not about dressing or pictures, but the image we represent, it's very important. So like things like that is what I was trying to put across.
Thank you so much, Justina. That was fantastic. It was a great pleasure and an honor to have you here today with us. Please feel free to stay for the rest of the session. Thank you so much.
I'll stay. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we can continue with our third speaker. So just give me a minute to return to my screen sharing. Okay. So we are having the great pleasure and honor to have with us Dr. Maria Augusta Arruda. Maria is an independent research strategy consultant, head of research and development at the University of Nottingham's Researcher Academy, and chair of the University of Nottingham's Black and Asian Minority Staff Network. Maria holds a Bachelor's of Science and PhD in pharmacology and has over 25 years of experience in academic and non-academic research environments. She has led and managed large-scale international research and training programs and has implemented research culture interventions for high performance in science. Maria will be speaking today to us about how every scientist can be a diplomat for fostering the idea of a sustainable world. Maria, I will stop sharing my screen and the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Georgia, thank you so much for the very kind invitation introduction. It's a true honor to be here among wonderful women in science and engineering, particularly being preceded by Parvin and Justina with their amazing presentations. I'm going to share my screen. So here we are. I think you can see it's not in presentation mode yet.
Yes, we can.
So Georgia, I would also ask you to interrupt me ruthlessly if I get too excited.
We have overrun a bit and I apologize. So if we can keep it to 15 minutes, that would be fantastic so that you have some time for questions. Yes.
Yeah, I'll do my very best.
Thank you.
So yes, as Georgia very kindly said, the title that I've chosen for this talk is In Every Scientist a Diplomat, and how it fosters an idea of a sustainable world. So when we think about all the challenges that we are facing now, from hunger to climate change to pollution, particularly plastic is in the ocean, that is something that we've been talking a lot recently, violence against women, all these challenges, they know no borders. And if you didn't get the message clearly before, I think that we all agree that COVID came to dismantle the illusion that problems and challenges, they happen or can be constrained to a regional or a region. If we think about the migrant crisis, it does not take too long to understand all the geopolitical issues that led to the many different reasons why people are displaced, for example. And we've got the Sustainable Development Goals trying to address that in a very comprehensive way. So it's no wonder that United Nations, they developed with the wider society the 17 goals, which are all transboundary. None of them are restricted to a certain region. 2021 has been a year that science diplomacy is everywhere if you want to look for it. Very, very recently, we had the COP26, so a bit just over a month ago. And we see the contrast and the tensions in society. So we've got scientists saying, proving the devastating effects of climate change that are already affecting us. That's going to get more extreme in the future if you don't do anything. There's society supporting this view, but a government being reticent and not bold enough, causing discontentment across many sectors of the society that can afford to think about things like climate change. And usually people that can afford the time to think about it are not the ones that are worse impacted by this catastrophe of the Anthropocene. Okay, but what is science diplomacy? Science diplomacy is nothing new. So if we think about the Silk Route, that route that connected the Far East all the way to the British Isles and the Scandinavia, it was this route that went through Asia, Africa, the Mediterranean. It was a route of exchange of goods, obviously, but also, and most importantly, it was a route of exchange of knowledge, and so of scientific exchange. So if you think about algebra, algorithms, so the clue is in the name, how the communication was exchanged, and we've got all the philosophies that actually were born in Africa that reached the Western world, etc. And I always like to show this picture of Kepler. Kepler was brilliant, important for us to understand the world as we know today. Particularly the solar system, as we know, the many advancements, many discoveries, but the concept was really designed and extrapolated by him, and was a person with his family that was always going from one place to the other, because he was not a very political person, but also because of patronage. If there was a count or viscount or a baron that would support him in his scientific pursuits, he would go and seek residence in these places to be to be supported by these benefactors. The science diplomacy also revealed injustices. So I am Brazilian. As a Black Brazilian, I'm the descendant of enslaved people that were carried from Africa, did the passage all the way to the Brazilian coast. And here we've got Humboldt, but also the young Charles Darwin, that revealed to the world the atrocities of slavery. So together with the scientific discoveries, the social commentary, and Darwin became a very, very strong abolitionist for his life after seeing what he saw in Brazil. And we can also think of what happened during the Cold War, when poliomyelitis was a big thing. There were two front runners, Salks and Albert Sabin. Albert Sabin didn't get much support in US, so to try his vaccine, that is the one that is most used in the developing world, he went to Russia in the middle of the Cold War, where he collaborated with the Minister of Health there to do the wide population studies with his new vaccine. And we are seeing today what is happening with the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, we don't learn with the lessons of history. And we know that the West particularly is hoarding vaccines when many, many parts of the world are not receiving them, but the effort to make the access to vaccines equitable is something transnational. The modern science diplomacy has many actors, and I would put INWES right in the center of all that, with other networks for women in science and work and networks for the whole scientific community in the world. And here, because I'm Brazilian, and don't forget my motherland, some important actors such as the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, but we've got the World Academy of Science, IIES, IAP, etc., and the Royal Society here where I live in the UK. So I used to say that, and I was taught science diplomacy, and I had the privilege of doing that by Dr. Justina Onoma's side in Trieste, that to make it easier, we can systematize science diplomacy as what I call the Holy Trinity: diplomacy for science, science for diplomacy, and science in diplomacy. And Professor Abdul Salam, the Pakistanis physicist, Nobel laureate, was founder of TWAS, that used to be the Third World Academy of Science, or the World Academy of Science back then, and also the Institute of International Center for Theoretic Physics. And he did that in Trieste. So Trieste is this very disputed land throughout history. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now it's part of Italy, and it borders what used to be Yugoslavia, that is now Slovenia, and Croatia. And he created he fostered the creation of a number of different research centers, as you can see here with these red dots in the map, in this very, very tiny strip of land, because it was one of the few places that both the West and the Soviet bloc would allow the scientists to interact, to collaborate. A true example of science diplomacy. Science for diplomacy, another example, is the work that the IIES, the American Association for Advancement of Science, the work they did with their Cuban counterparts, that led to the reopening of the US Embassy in Havana, just to be closed after we know by who. And hopefully, I don't know, I didn't follow, but I hope that things are coming back to normal now. There's diplomacy for science, that we can think of the many institutions and programs like Horizon Europe, that is the one that we know well here in Europe, but also Newton Fund, Global Challenges Research Fund, that foster collaborations between countries isolated geographically. Unfortunately, we are all experiencing, I think that not many countries, I would say, I hope Korea is not, I hope Canada is not, I hope Japan is not facing cuts in science. It comes from this attempt to discredit scientific knowledge. That is the thing that is saving us right now, particularly the collaboration with the developing world, that we know that it's self-harm, this concept that we are all together. And science in diplomacy is this work that we do informing governments and policymakers on the most diverse areas of knowledge. Capacity building science diplomacy is something really, really important. So there are now a number of initiatives, some of them online, that aim to produce a literate community, a scientific community literate in science diplomacy. And I'm happy to share some more resources after this meeting. So I think that is very difficult to talk only about gender in science when everything is so intersectional. So it does not take much to see how racism and misogyny work together to hinder the progress of science. So there is this very interesting book called The Invisible Woman that says that the deadly truth about a world that was designed for men, by men, for men. And I would go further. It's not any man, it's the Caucasian man that he lives in, particularly in Europe and North America. That's the world that we have been designed. And if you see the photos I showed before, there were practically only men, only European or European descendant men, apart from the magnificent Abdul Salam. So we see that the world is designed by and for less than 10% of the world population. And it should not surprise us that it's the world that we don't have an effective cure for malaria, but we've got an amazing solution for erectile dysfunction. It's a world that is struggling to share the benefit of years and years, decades of research with the wider population. Do we think that if COVID was restricted to Africa or to any other continent in the global south, we would have the commotion to bring a solution? We saw what happened with Ebola. So there is, particularly with the Western glance, with the European or North American, Caucasian lens, we are all, and most of the people in this virtual room, ethnic minorities, but actually we are the global majority. And it takes us to the diversity paradox. My pharmacology degree came as a result of my very first degree, that was biology. And as a biologist, I've got a mind that sometimes think like ecologists, because I learned it very early on in my scientific career. And we call the ecologists, I'm not ecologists, call monocultures of plants, very what happens is that there was big deforestation. Say, okay, oh my bad, let's plant loads of eucalyptus. The biodiversity of these areas, and then this everything that comes with it, becomes impoverished. And ecologists call this situation of green deserts. These green deserts, these monocultures, they can lead to exacerbation. I'm going to finish in 3 minutes of our problems, George, of our food production. And there is this amazing paper here. We're surrounded by scientists, so I'm sure you're going to appreciate it. It's a PNAS paper that shows the diverse innovation paradox. Basically, women and people from ethnic minorities, they innovate more than their male and white counterparts. But their discoveries are discarded. And we've got now, as a scientific community, we start to have the lexicon to understand these consequences of misogyny and of systemic racism. And I like this paper very much from Human Genetics and Genomics that puts diversity as an ethos that involves, and I just need to take my reflection, intentionality, that is something that Justina talked about, reckoning, interrogation, and introspection. Very quickly, women in science is a matter of choice. I've got a daughter that she did philosophy, then she decided to do biosciences. That's what she's finishing now. Now she works for BBC as well. She's a bit of a Renaissance woman. But it's not the reality of every woman from my background. And there is this young lady that's now doing PhD in Cambridge that I mentor, Tommy Akimbadi. She created the Black Women in Science Network. And something that she said, I didn't see how I fit into those possibilities. And it should not be like that. It does not need to be like that. And a very good example is in a country that is so problematic like Brazil, when there was a bold decision to create positive actions, and it was aligned to the scientific initiation program that is putting people into the labs as they get into the university. We increase the number of scientists, of women scientists. And in this case, we've got 3 Black doctors that I had the pleasure to teach. And for myself, and I wouldn't put that, but with the Hodgkin example, when I was awarded the L'Oreal Prize for Women in Science, what appeared in the newspaper, that was the craze, is that, she's not a samba dancer, because they mixed me with a samba dancer in a conference. I was attending a very fancy hotel. And no, I never had the body of the samba dancer, unfortunately. So we need to start young and just fostering the idea of a sustainable world. I think that we as women in science, and obviously we are all diplomats, I think that we are exquisitely positioned to exercise the science of affection and the affection for science and in science. And I would like to thank, the opportunities I had. And here I've got a photo with Justina that I didn't want to miss. And if we want to take this conversation forward, it would be amazing. Ubuntu. Thank you very much.
Maria, thank you so much. That was such a fantastic talk. Really, honestly, a fantastic talk, very inspiring and motivating. And I would like to invite the audience for any questions or comments. You will see the comments also in the chat. I think many people are so impressed about your talk. Any questions or comments for Maria? No? So I'm reading the comments. They are really fantastic comments for your presentation. Again, Maria, in one phrase, if you were to give the biggest challenge that you find in your profession, what would this be? What would that be? The biggest challenge that you feel that we need to overcome?
Yeah, I think that thank you very much, Georgia, for your question. I think that there is strength in numbers, and we should not shy away from some of the rhetoric to keep less women and women from every shape, colors, and sizes into academia. I think that this rhetoric has been weaponized with time. Many women that are or not women of color, they feel that, oh, I don't think that there should be positive action. I didn't benefit myself from positive action. I think it's something that is really, really important for gender parity and for racial parity as well. I think it's a very, very important resource. It does not mean that we are not excellent. It means that we are bringing equity to the table, because we need, just like I think Parveen mentioned, there are discussions, there are things that we will not talk if there is not someone from that group on the table. I would say the same thing about disabilities, for example, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need the different perspectives on the table so we can discuss them, and just like diversity is life, isn't it? Diversity is life.
Lovely. I see a couple of questions in the chat. So Sarah is asking how big a disadvantage is to be a scientist from Brazil. So Sarah is thinking about the state of science in Brazil, the advantages of the global north, and so on. So,
thank you very much, Sarah. Well, if there's anything, I'm so grateful for having my formative years in Brazil, because when resources are scarce, Brazil is a bit of a chimera. It's a mixture of a place that it struggles with resources for science, but you've got fantastic scientists there, and we are used to working low resource settings. So you really need to think a lot when you decide to do an experiment, because things can take 6 months to arrive in the lab. So I think that's one of the good things. Definitely, when I came to UK, it was for a sabbatical of 1 year, and here I am 10 years on. The resources in the global north, there's no way to question how much better it is. But there are other challenges. There are cultural challenges. Brazil and Portugal are the countries with a greater proportion of women in science and engineering. So the structure of the families, that's another reason. I've got a 22-year-old daughter. She was born in Brazil. And families, they come together. They've got it's a very different way of operating. So the victory of a woman in science is the victory of the whole family, so to speak. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. That was perfect. And I will raise just a last question because we are overrunning a little bit. So from Gail, how do you think INWES can help to address the issues in science diplomacy with regards, of course, to participation of women in science?
I think that you are doing such an amazing job of keeping this network together. Sometimes I realize, when I start to be more of a strategist than a scientist, that branding sometimes is the thing. I think that INWES is doing an amazing job for women in science. and in science diploma and in science diplomacy as well. So maybe it's just to say it out loud that what you do, what we're doing here is a science diplomacy exercise. So it's to continue to amplify what you've been doing so well.
Thank you. That is perfect. I would like to thank you so much, Maria, for being here today. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honor. Your talk has been fantastic and so inspirational for all of us. Please check more comments for more comments in the chat. And if someone is having a question for Maria, we can pick it outside of this session today. So thank you once again, Maria, for everything. And
an honor, thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to just return for 2 minutes only, and then we are really finished, to return to my slides. I would like to express my sincere thanks, of course, to all three speakers, it goes without saying, also to our INWES president, Professor Jung-Sung Kim, the Korea women scientists and engineers, the many people behind the scenes from the conferences, IT and communications teams of INWES. So Sylvia, Sarah, Aguri, Belen, Mary, Najla, and Nelly in particular. I would like to thank so much our administrative support from Hyung Jang from KWSC. And just a little bit for the future, our next steps, our intention is within INWES to start running more a series of such webinars. After this event, you will receive by email a feedback survey. So please take a couple of minutes to provide us with feedback on how we can make those events better for you in the future, or really help us identify what went really well in this session today. The webinar will become available on our YouTube channel. I strongly would like to encourage you to register on our YouTube channel. So go on YouTube, type INWES Global and register to our channel. And please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and through our website for finding out more about what we are doing at INWES. We are looking forward for more webinars. If you have some great ideas or great suggestions on what webinars we could be delivering in the future, we have already identified a set of them. For example, the gender pay gap, the female representation in decision making. So these are some of the topics that we are going to cover in the future. But if you have more ideas, please contact myself directly and let me know about your suggestions. So you can see my email address on the slide right now. I would be very happy to speak with you outside of this session. So thank you so much, everyone. I will stop sharing my screen, and I would like to ask you to turn on your cameras, please, so that we can have a group photo, and share your photos with us on our communications email account. Thank you very much for the fantastic discussions, the perfect presentations, and everyone for your time and your questions and your engagement to this event. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely day, remaining day or night. Some of you are very late in the evening. And Happy New Year, everyone, if we don't speak again by that time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Lovely.
Bye, Maria.
Bye-bye, everyone from Nigeria.
Bye, everyone.
Okay. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you.
Everyone from Senegal.
Bye, Rufina. Bye. Nice to see you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too.
Thank you, and you too.
Bye bye. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.